brought you Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, and Under the Banner of Heaven, Mormons in Media and Mormon Land join forces to explore the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Welcome to the monthly Mormons in Media and Mormon Land crossover episode. This is the podcast where we talk about questions about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints based on what we are seeing in pop culture. Today, Nicole and I are so excited to be joined by our special guest, Cristina Rosetti. We are talking about the new Netflix docuseries that's called Trust Me, The False Prophet, that's based on an FLDS community in Short Creek, Arizona. So I feel like for this discussion, maybe we should each just go around quickly and give a brief intro and kind of like where we're approaching this conversation from. Nicole, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'm approaching this conversation as somebody who is floored from this docuseries. I have no tie to any religion, just a Netflix subscription.
That's a pretty good tie these days.
This is true. There's some good stuff between that Age of Attraction and now Temptation Island. My palette is diverse.
Yes. Okay, I'm Rebbie. I'm from Mormons in Media. I am a lifelong member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I run Mormons in Media, where I cover like all mainstream representation of members of the church of all stripes. And I am also floored by this. And yeah, there's plenty more to come on that. But yeah, Cristina, I first met Cristina a few years ago. I can't even remember who connected us, but Cristina is someone that I have leaned on repeatedly anytime there's something that involves fundamentalists, because I feel as though the way they're often depicted is they're kind of shown as very flat, and I have really appreciated kind of just the deeper level of understanding and nuance that she's always been able to provide me to just kind of approach it with more kindness and, I don't know, compassion than just like look at these people in their, interesting dresses, which I feel like is kind of how they've come to kind of be like this character. So, Cristina, tell us about yourself.
Hi, I'm Cristina. I unfortunately was not shocked by the documentary, even though I watched it. And I have a PhD in religious studies from University of California, Riverside, and I have written extensively on Mormon fundamentalist history and doctrine, not just about polygamy, but actually trying to make fundamentalism about more than just polygamy, because it is its own religious system. It's not just LDS people with more moms. I used to be a professor, and then I retired, got married, and moved to rural Canada.
Yay. Happily ever after.
Happily, and then I'm still here somehow.
So great. I am so excited. I mean, I feel like I feel like everyone's talking about this documentary, right? Like it's number one on my Netflix. I feel like it's all over. Maybe it's just that my algorithm knows me. But I would be curious to hear, just kind of to jump in, Cristina, like because you've been to Short Creek, right? You've like spent time with their tell us just a little bit about your experience, like being there personally and knowing this community personally.
Yeah. So, I mean, I have been to Short Creek many times. When it comes to fundamentalism, generally, I always like to start by noting, for those who might not be familiar, that the FLDS is one of many Mormon fundamentalist religions and communities. Most Mormon fundamentalists in the world are not FLDS. All FLDS people are Mormon fundamentalists, but not all Mormon fundamentalists are FLDS. There was a time when the FLDS was the largest Mormon fundamentalist religion. That's not true today. I would say that the Apostolic United Brethren, the AUB in Bluffdale, Riverton, is the biggest Mormon fundamentalist religion. You wouldn't probably know that because they dress like you. And so they, don't get kind of the true crime moment. They don't get the media representation because most people don't want to watch a Netflix show of people wearing jeans. So that's just something to note. So most of the interaction I've had with Mormon fundamentalist people, with polygamous people, is not with the FLDS. It's with religious traditions that break off from the Apostolic United Brethren, or with independent Mormon fundamentalists who don't have a prophet or a group. We can talk about that if you're interested. But within Short Creek.
Sorry, can I ask about the AUB? Do they also live in a society where it's pretty isolated just to them and you just wouldn't know it because, again, they look like everyone else? Or are they more kind of integrated into, neighborhoods where not everyone is part of the community?
They're very integrated. I mean, if you've ever seen the show Sister Wives, that's where they come out of. Okay. I don't know. I don't want to speak to their affiliation because I don't know if they're still, active members in that community. And I haven't read Christine Brown's memoir, but they come out of the Apostolic United Brethren. So they are fairly diversely located. Of course, they are largely in the Bluffdale, Riverton, Point of the Mountain, Draper area.
Yeah. Which is 10 minutes from me. Nicole, just for your, that's right up the street from me. It's right there.
Asking about Short Creek, is Short Creek, I know you said it's in Arizona, is that right on the Utah border? Is that very close to Utah or?
Yeah, so Short Creek is a colloquial name, or the Crick, how it's referred to down there, which is given to the twin cities of Hilldale, Utah and Colorado City, Arizona. And the border is a road called Uzona. And this was done very much by design for those who don't know, the FLDS wasn't incorporated until 1991. But before the FLDS was incorporated, Mormon polygamists have been living in that region since the 1930s. And they moved down there to escape both the government, but also the LDS Church, which was actively prosecuting and persecuting polygamist people, especially under
Jody Brown moved.
Yeah, there it is, right? This is not much has changed. But Heber J. Grant, the president of the LDS Church in 1933, told law enforcement to prosecute polygamists. And so they all fled and they moved to this area. And it was smart because when Utah law enforcement came in, you could walk across the border to Arizona. And when Arizona law enforcement came in, you could walk across the border to Utah. Now, this presents a problem when the federal government comes in, which it did twice. Now with Sam Bateman 3 times. And there have been, there's been a long history of raids in this community, 1953 being the most traumatic one, where many children were taken from their families, even monogamous families lost their children down there. But so this community is long established as a place to try to escape from outsiders, whereas other fundamentalist communities aren't necessarily like that. I do want to note that just because people are interested, if you go to Short Creek, which you can, it's often portrayed as somewhere that you can't go. If you go to Short Creek, you're probably not going to see FLDS people. Most of the town are either former members of the FLDS who are not practicing anymore, or you're going to see people who moved there to be close to Zion National Park. So you're not actually going to see, most people who are going down there because of TV are definitely doing the whole cult tourism thing, but you're probably not going to see a lot of prairie dresses. There are certain places where you will, like certain stores, certain parts of the community where you will, but it's not a town of prairie dresses like I think people might imagine.
Yeah. Can I ask why they wear them when other communities don't?
Yeah. So one of the really interesting things is that if you look at pictures from the Short Creek community, so before it was called the FLDS, it was just called the Work. It wasn't that this kind of changed in the really 80s and 90s. But up until really, what's kind of strange about the community is if you look at women who are the most marked as fundamentalist in this community because of their outfits, if you go, the further back in time you go, the more modern they look in a lot of ways. If you look at if you look at pictures from the 1944 raid, you see women in pencil skirts and white blouses. If you look at pictures from the women in jail in the 1953 raid, one of my favorite pictures from the 53 raid is a really tragic picture of women sitting in their prison cell, and they have really kind of chic hairstyles. They look very modern. They look very kind of, like anyone. And as time went on and the community became more insular and the leadership became stricter, the outfits became increasingly like what we see now. So under Warren Jeff's father, we see a Rulin. We see the dress style become more of what it is today in darker colors, usually with very big white collars. And then it's really not until the end of Rulin Jeffs and the rise of Warren Jeffs that we see the prairie dress style that we know of now. And they do have kind of very particular aesthetic choices. The lighter colors are kind of historically became a symbol of righteousness. You won't see the very pastel dresses anymore. Those dresses, for the most part, are worn by women who are FLDS, who are not in Short Creek anymore, who are in other areas where there are FLDS people. But so the dresses have changed significantly, and it is really kind of symbolic of Warren Jeff's control. It is not a historic part of the faith.
Fascinating. Can I ask, as someone with so much insight into this community, watching this documentary, does it feel like, what percent, I don't know if accurate is the word, but I just find, as someone who's, consuming media that portrays my religion, one of my frequent questions or I guess reactions is like, how accurate does this feel? Or how frustrating is it when they're playing things up for the sake of, drama or scandal? I mean, this story is inherently like insane, and packed with drama and tragedy and all of these things. But I'm curious if there's anything to you that you felt like was kind of Hulu being Hulu. Sorry, it wasn't Hulu, it was Netflix. I'm so used to being mad at Hulu. What did you think? Did you have any, or did it feel like, oh yeah, this is like a pretty accurate depiction? Was it hard for you to watch, like having had more of an insider, I guess, understanding of this culture?
Not particularly. I mean, Sam Bateman's group is, it's too many victims, to be clear, but it is, a handful of families. And so they're families that kind of consolidated under this man fairly recently. So the extent to what their beliefs were, things like that, were things that were outside of my purview, outside of my knowledge base. So I wasn't, I'm not prepared to say if something it was inaccurate. The one thing I will say that I found frustrating is it really left a big question mark of why would people follow Sam Bateman? There was a very distinct lack of history of who this community is, where they come from, why they exist, who's the guy in the pictures hanging over their wall that is wearing a tie. We've seen him in documentaries before. What's the connection to him? Is he the prophet? Is Warren Jeffs the prophet? What is this community? And so it did feel like there was like a distinct lack of historical understanding or context by the filmmakers that I would have liked to see cleared up.
Yeah, to speak on that, like I will say, as somebody in, North Carolina who has no tie to any of this, like obviously because of my work and my interests, I have somehow become this like spokesperson for the LDS in North Carolina, like I don't know how, but like my friends know now if they have questions that they come to me. But I will say, like, watching this, because of the reporting and just because of different documentaries like Keep Sweet and Obey and just different ones that I've seen, I knew the history, but I did get a lot of people who this was their first docuseries into something fundamentalist, and their minds were blown. And without that history, I do feel like there could be damage done, because now it's like, oh, this is the norm, or like, I feel like there can be danger in that.
Well, and it's also like, I'm just wondering about that creative choice. Were they like, oh, everyone already watched? Were they thinking of it as a sequel to Keep Sweet? And so they're like, oh, just watch that one. I mean, I watched Keep Sweet, and I still am like, I still don't understand how these people could have, kind of fallen prey to this man. So I don't know, maybe we should talk about that. Cristina, do you think it would be good to kind of start with like, just like the Warren Jeffs playbook and how that kind of like laid the foundation for something like this to have to happen? I know that's a huge question, but
Yeah.
We know nothing. So tell us what you know.
That's not true. Watch all documentaries.
Right? Yeah, we know everything there is to know.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a big question. So, I mean, I mentioned that Mormon fundamentalists go down to Short Creek in the 1930s, and they're really led by a council. They're called the Council of Friends. And over time, of course, men in the council die out, and we get the emergence of a man named Leroy S. Johnson, who remains a fairly beloved figure in the community. And after Leroy Johnson dies, a man rises to power named Rulon Jeffs. That is Warren's father. And two things, I think, really substantially come together that led to Sam Bateman being able to take power. The first one, and this maybe will sound familiar to people who watch the documentary, but Sam Bateman talks a little bit about how he's kind of something of a mouthpiece for Warren Jeffs, who's in prison. And that is not out of the norm. And I say that because when Rulon Jeffs has a stroke and is about to die in 2002, he leaves behind 65 wives. Now that seems like a big number. It is a big number. And he leaves behind 65 wives because as Rulon Jeffs was getting progressively sicker and sicker, his son Warren starts sealing him to younger and younger women with the recognition that when Rulon dies, Warren will inherit his wives. And Warren begins, and importantly, Warren Jeffs is not kind of really established as the man who's going to take over leadership for his father. He is the principal of the Altar Academy, and he's around, but he really wasn't in the line of succession. But what he ends up doing is he ends up telling...
Can I interrupt you just quickly? What is the line of succession? So, right, for people in the LDS faith, it's in order of seniority.
Right.
Prophet dies, whoever's been in there the longest next, right, is next up. Is there an established way? Was there an established way that the line of succession worked, or how did that work? Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, so it depends on the group. For the most part, in the early fundamentalist movement, there was always there was the council of 5 men, the Council of Friends, and people would be added to the council as people died out. The Council of Friends is 5 men, and generally there would be a man who was called the second elder, and the second elder was an appointed man who was like next in charge. And when they would constantly be adding men to the council as people died out, but there would be a group of 5 men who oversaw the community, with one man being the president of the priesthood. And he always had someone that was the second elder that would kind of be the next in line. The FLDS, what becomes the FLDS, splits from this pretty early. And under John Y. Barlow, who is one of the very early men of the Council of Friends, he slowly starts consolidating power under just him. And that becomes a doctrine called one-man rule, which Warren Jeffs will, of course, run with, that he is the one guy, there is no council anymore. Ultimately, this actually causes a schism in the Short Creek community. And there are a substantial number of people in Short Creek who decided, no, we're not going to follow just one guy. And they end up moving to Centennial Park and founding their own fundamentalist religion that was not based on one guy. But that's how it worked, is they had someone kind of that was second in command, but they had a council. But Warren circumvents this. And the reason he's able to circumvent it is he starts telling people that Rulon would not die. Rulon would be renewed. And this, of course, he even writes a song about it. And the song is...
What is up with these men and songs?
The song is kind of strange. I can actually read you the paragraph. It's for he shall run and leap on Zion's streets of gold. His body will then be renewed, restored as his youth. His handmaidens shall be increased, and great will be his seed. The Lord has worked a miracle. Our prophet has been healed. The problem is that Rulon dies. He dies. This didn't happen, but Warren, at the funeral, stands before the community and claims that Rulon actually had been renewed. He had been renewed in him, and Warren is now the mouthpiece of God. And so for Sam to basically say this, he's playing by exactly what Warren did. So he has a group of people who have this living memory of how authority works, and he just does the same thing.
It's wild. So with Warren, so he essentially was saying, it's like very North Korea, right? Like the ruler will never die, but then when he does, it's like, oh, I'm now the embodiment of him. Is he actually saying like he speaks through me, or is he just saying like his authority is now in me?
So it depends. I mean, because he was sealing Rulin's wives he ended up sealing Rulin's wives to himself. And so in some way he was kind of a continuation of Rulin. In practicality, he just is the next prophet of the community. And that's really what it became. What his vision for that was probably more a embodiment of Rulin's authority and his place in the community. But really, he just becomes the next prophet.
Yeah. But like, just asking. So you mentioned that the FLDS is just one of many fundamentalist groups. Like, so does each group have a prophet, or like because I said it like 3 documentaries ago. Whenever somebody starts saying they're hearing voices and they start giving orders, like I feel like that's the first sign to run, like get out of there. Yeah. Because it seems like this is just where it always starts, is like somebody has something speaking through them. And going back to the documentary where you see all of these portraits of Warren Jeffs in their house, like is there a Warren Jeffs for every community?
So yes and no. So what made Mormon fundamentalism, or what made the early polygamist movement kind of compelling to people, is that in its earliest iterations, especially in the 1930s and 40s, Mormon fundamentalism actually did not want to replace the LDS Church. All these people were still LDS. The problem is that the LDS Church had stopped practicing polygamy, and that was bad because every prophet had said polygamy is the law of heaven, and you need it to go to heaven. And so suddenly the LDS Church is saying, we're not doing polygamy anymore. And all these people are saying, well, then how do we go to heaven? And so the early theology, and what made it compelling to people, is that early fundamentalists said that the LDS Church is the temporal institution on earth. It is the church. We, however, hold the keys of the priesthood. You go to church, but we will seal you polygamously so that you can continue to go to heaven. And so there wasn't a prophet necessarily. There was what was called a president of the priesthood. Heber J. Grant was the president of the church. But who was the president of the priesthood? It wasn't Heber J. Grant for the Mormon fundamentalist movement. And this actually continued until the 1970s, when most fundamentalists would have said, certainly, that the leaders of the LDS Church were the leaders of the church, but they just weren't the leaders of the priesthood. Over time, this kind of this distinction disappeared as they started to less and less believe that the church had any kind of established authority. And when that happened, the men who were the heads of the priesthood slowly kind of used the language of prophet. So most communities that are distinct churches will have a president of the priesthood who will kind of colloquially be called the prophet. So the Apostolic United Brethren has a president of the priesthood who is a prophet. The Centennial Park has a president of the priesthood who in some ways is like the prophet. But more and more, one of the things that is interesting about fundamentalism is when we look at the kind of abuses and the problems within the Mormon fundamentalist movement, it's not just us who notice the problem. Mormon fundamentalists realize this too. And so more and more, people who are practicing polygamy are actually not part of groups or part of churches or part of religions. Many of them are what is called an independent fundamentalist, where they are polygamist, they believe in fundamentalism, but they don't follow a particular prophet.
That's so interesting. And it's so like, as an outsider, it's like, okay, I look at Warren Jeffs and I just see, okay, clearly that guy's been evil all along. He was brainwashing people. He was like, what was it about him that appealed to people in the beginning? Was it always just about a power grab and control? Like, what are the, is it just polygamy that sets them apart beliefs wise? I don't know. I guess it's hard to not from the outside be like, how could you not know that one guy seizing power was going to be bad, right? But I only have my limited knowledge of it. So do you think that's kind of what they talked about in this documentary? I think it was Julia who said, like, we were just taught to never question, especially as women. Like, we're taught to
obey. Obedience. That's the one thing that stuck out to me too, is from childhood, that's what they are taught, is above else, obedience is the most important thing. And you could tell that none of them were ever taught critical thinking.
Yeah. And like, is that like just obedience to polygamy? Is that obedience to all the questions? I just asked you 7 questions, but pick somewhere to start. Sorry.
Well, I mean, I think when it comes to obedience, I think that's really important. And it might be difficult for LDS listeners to hear, but I think there's truth in saying that Doctrine and Covenants 130 is where that comes from. And the gospel manuals for Sunday school say that obedience is the first law of heaven. In LDS manuals, that's not an FLDS belief. That's not a fundamentalist Mormon belief. That's a Mormon belief. Now, granted, the LDS Church, of course, does not demand obedience in this same way, but obedience to priesthood is something that is Mormon. I mean, that is part and parcel of the Mormon cosmological structure. Yeah. It is part of Mormon temple covenants. It's part of Mormonism.
For sure. I think I was wondering while watching this, like, am I more unnerved by this than someone? I mean, it's scary to hear them talk in a way that I hear people sometimes talk every Sunday. It's like, it's scary. It's unnerving. And is the difference, would you say that like when people don't obey, there's like punishment or shame? Because that was one thing I felt like with Sam. It felt like, you kind of, the whole time you're like, why are they following this guy? How my question for a lot of it was, how did he get these other grown men that seem way wealthier than him and way more successful, which is another thing I want to talk about, is the money. But, how did he get them to comply? Right. And then it kind of comes out that Moroni, one of the 3 men who he like absorbed into his group, had been, after Warren Jeffs said from prison, okay, no one can get married, no one can have sex, no one can have kids. But Moroni does that anyway. And then he has so much shame about it. And then Sam says, oh, it's actually okay. That to me, I was like, okay, that feels like, he's weaponizing spiritual shame to try and get Moroni, I guess, on his side. But, where did I start that? Oh, so do you think it's maybe one of the key differences, or what makes the abuse possible, is that there is punishment associated with lack of obedience or shame, or like what is, or just groupthink?
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things that really set, I mean, among many things, like I don't want to kind of be dismissive of the really real harm and victimization under Warren Jeffs, but something that became a hallmark of his leadership was family separation and kind of separating families out, assigning women to new men, just kind of getting rid of young boys from the community, mixing around families, putting people into different communities. And, and in many cases, tragically, there are people who don't know where their children are still. Or don't know where their mothers are. Like it is a deeply traumatic model of leadership. And that is a method of wielding fear. I mean, it's one thing for a leader to say, if you're not obedient, you might go to outer darkness. And that's scary for people. Please don't misunderstand. But it's another that you're constantly living with the idea that your mother might disappear in the middle of the night. Like that's a very different level of fear that is going to cause obedience in a way that is really kind of unimaginable for most people.
Yeah.
So
that was used as a method of punishment, that family separation.
Yeah. I mean, people were sent away for things that were ultimately fairly innocuous. I mean, I know someone who was sent away because he watched Finding Nemo. So this is it's really for almost anything.
Oh.
It sounds like a perfect storm, and I don't know, like, obviously it's way, hindsight is 2020, right? Like it's way easier to be on the outside and looking in and, you know, red flag, red flag, red flag. Like I totally understand that. But like you just said, someone getting in trouble for watching Finding Nemo, I think on top of the obedience, which is kind of why I think this docuseries was so flooring, is because this didn't happen in the 50s. This didn't happen in the early 2000s. This happened in the 2020s. Like this was happening, and it, in a world of social media, in a world of unlimited access and of uncontrollable information that it's just easily accessible, it does seem like on top of obedience, it's also the perfect storm of isolation. Is that if they don't have these links or this connection to the outside world, then everything's normal to them.
Yeah.
If this remains normal, then they're not going to know any different. Whereas, like, I think that's the beautiful part of getting out into the world and experiencing different people, different cultures, different religions, is that you start to, you know, pick up and start to, you know, shape shift your own mind and, you know, form your own thoughts. And it doesn't seem like they're ever given that chance.
Yeah, tell us about that, Cristina. What is like education and media exposure like for the FLDS, and is that the same across different fundamentalist groups?
Yeah, I mean, the FLDS, again, I think it is worth noting that the FLDS is fairly unique. There are some other groups that act like the FLDS, but they don't represent, you know, Mormon fundamentalism broadly. I'm friends with Mormon fundamentalist people on Facebook, right? So, I mean, like, yeah. there's that. There's some on TikTok. I mean, your mileage may vary, but under Warren, especially, outside kind of influence was very limited. And of course, that doesn't mean it didn't happen. People who worked, for example, in guard towers in Texas would have had access to the internet and could have looked things up, and they did. And so that is, people who were sent away, you know, would have turned on the radio, maybe without, you know, telling anyone, but they would have. But inside the community, I mean, there was an attempt to limit access to the outside world. And the range to which this happened was such that, you know, when you're in school under Warren Jeffs, you didn't learn history, you learned priesthood history. So you're not really learning about who the president of the United States is. You're learning who the president of the priesthood is. And one of the kind of examples that I think of most often in terms of cultural awareness from the inside, a good friend of mine who had left in, I want to say it was 2018, I came over to another friend's house and we were decorating for St. Patrick's Day for her children. And he asked me what a leprechaun was. And I had never really even considered what that question is, of like, what, that just seems something so kind of obvious. But of course, when you're raised in a culture that doesn't really do holidays or really encounter the outside world, that's difficult. Now, other fundamentalist communities are different. I do know one fundamentalist community that has really tried. Their most recent leader who died, he tried really valiantly to make Christmas April 6th, like Joseph Smith wanted it to be. And boy, that's a hard thing to break.
Oh, wow. Yeah, going up against Christmas, that is a losing battle. I would guess. That's an uphill battle, at least.
I do want to note too, real quick, that when the mention of like that marriage and you mentioned Moroni Johnson seeing, kind of wanting to be married and seeing how families were working. I think that is a really kind of crucial part of the story that was mentioned in the documentary, but I don't think like really mentioned enough, that Warren Jeffs did end all sealings. And not only did he end all sealings, but every marriage was annulled. So there were no children, there were no marriages, nothing was happening in the community. Now, this, of course, did not apply to Warren, and this, you know, like that his, the victims that he had were still victimized in many ways, but people weren't getting married. And you have to imagine that if you're a young woman and your entire life is set up that, to use their language, that you're going to be placed beside a priesthood holder, their language for married. And that is your path to exaltation. And suddenly you see this man who can offer this to you. Granted, you have to marry him, and granted, he has to be the father of the children. But this isn't just offering you marriage, which might be a deep desire of yours, but it's also offering you heaven, and the only path to that could possibly exist. Like, this is such a perfect storm of the perfect power vacuum, the only opportunity you have to heaven, that you've spent your whole life being taught that obedience to priesthood is everything. And there's now a priesthood holder who's telling you that he can get you to heaven, he can get you a marriage, he can get you children. And you also don't have a lot of solid male figures in the community. They've all been sent away. Oh. You might not have your mothers around. They might have been sent away, or they've left the FLDS and you're too scared to talk to them. You've lost any kind of substantial support network. What are the options?
So at what point did Warren Jeffs cancel all the sealings?
So it was a revelation when he went to prison.
Okay. So it wasn't until, okay. So it was after he went to prison. And what year did he go to prison? Like, how many years were they living in this sort of limbo?
He got sentenced. I just Googled this, so I'll tell you. He was arrested on August 29th, 2006. And then he was later convicted and sentenced to life in prison. August.
Wow, that's a long time ago.
2011.
Okay, that's longer ago than I realized.
But here, I have a question in regards to him. Like, for all of, the stuff that he got charged and convicted of is very brutal. So all of these people, did they hit the wives, the kids, the followers, whatever? Did they see this as an attack on them, which is why they defended him? Or because some of them still had photos of him up. So what did FLDS think of it? Were they just this is the government coming after us? Or
yeah, because wasn't there a line about that in the docuseries where they said it turned him into a martyr, it just made them believe in him more? How widespread was that? I have a similar question. Were there people who, after Warren Jeffs was convicted, were they kind of saw the light? And I'm sure there are people who left, but how broadly was that the case versus, kind of what Nicole's saying, them him getting turned into a martyr, where they are still, hanging on his every word that he's sending from prison until he stopped doing that.
Yeah, one of the difficulties is it's very difficult to know how many FLDS people there are. There are communities in Idaho, Colorado, South Dakota, and Utah, and Arizona, also in Mexico and Canada. So it's hard to know how many FLDS people there are. Many people did leave when he went to prison, but it's also the case that many followers don't really know his crimes and why he's in prison. And could you tell them? Sure. Will they believe you? I don't know.
Yeah.
Can they Google it? Yeah, if they have access to a computer and access to Google and aren't under the eye of a caretaker that you've been placed under. There's just so many factors to that. But the other thing that, again, might be challenging for LDS listeners to hear is that the first prophet went to prison too.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to put too fine a point on this, but I do think it's worth saying that I went to Liberty Jail once to take a tour, and the sister missionary told me that Joseph Smith went to jail for telling people that Jesus Christ and Heavenly Father were different people. And that's not true. That's not why he went to jail. He went to jail for destroying a printing press. And those are very different things. Now, of course, I do think that the comparisons between Joseph Smith and Warren Jeffs are very lazy comparisons, to be clear. But I think Warren Jeffs was able to weaponize that in a way that can't be overlooked.
Totally. Yeah, there's for sure seeds of persecution complex, martyrs. We talk openly about Joseph Smith and Hiram, them being martyrs. So I think, that makes total sense to me. So, and I think this maybe continues the question is, I mean, Julia was this heartbreaking character who, you know, she gives 5 of her kids end up being married to Sam and being put in this horrible, horrible situation, including her underage daughters. Basically robs her of her children. She's an empty nester all of a sudden. And then that moment where she kind of sees the light and starts coming over to Christine and telling her, opening up to her. I guess I'm curious, and I don't know if anyone knows this, but I found myself why is it that she can see that this is wrong with Sam, but she still has the photo of Warren Jeffs up on her wall? Is it that it's wrong because they're underage? Is it wrong because it's not coming from Warren, that she still believes in the principle of polygamy, but it should be done under Warren or not? Was that confusing to you guys? I don't know. I feel like that broke my brain a little bit.
I mean, I don't want to, of course, speak for someone who's been victimized by this community. I don't think we can know about the choices people make in these very difficult situations.
Sure.
I do think there's something to be said that, and I know what I'm about to say, I do know from knowing fundamentalist people, is that it is different when it's your children, because Warren Jeffs married children, but it's very different when it's your children.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's another thing that it's so hard. We can't understand them, right? I cannot, because I felt like Julia was such a hero. She finally stood up. She, fought for her kids. She was pivotal in the whole case. She was so brave. She made so many hard choices. But then I find myself what happens to her now? Is she still, if Warren Jeffs were to come back and say, would she, I just find myself I want her to be fully liberated. And I know I'm putting my spin on that, on what that liberation looks like. But that was just a really interesting and I feel very complicated part of this was what is the difference between Sam Bateman and Warren Jeffs? To me, nothing, but again, I haven't come from the same background and I haven't grown up with this. So
I will say that there is that one scene with the cop, and I can't remember his name, but when he said something, he made a comment about oh yeah, this isn't for us sensitive guys, or this isn't for the faint of heart. No. I'm
no, that made me so mad. I'm you lost that option when you chose your profession.
Yes.
Yeah.
You have to sit with this. Who else is going to sit with it? If you're, yeah, he's I just didn't want to burden myself with the uncomfortable details of that case. Guess what? Neither did I, but neither do any of us. There's some level of I don't know, sitting with someone in their pain, especially if you're in a position to possibly change it.
But leave it to a woman.
Yes.
Leave it to the women.
Our hero, she's the best. Can we talk for a minute about the money? Because this is perplexing to me. I feel I hear anecdotally, Warren Jeffs, I remember them talking about all the businesses he had. Mm-hmm. I have heard of other fundamentalist leaders who have massive amounts of wealth. How I explain the money? I don't understand how this seems to be a pattern, or is it not a pattern?
Maybe. I think, there is money in the community. And the reason for that is the Bicelines, especially, were major business owners. Torrance Biceline worked in many industries. The biggest is he owned something called Velociraptor, which I have tried so hard to explain, to figure out what cable wrapping mechanisms are. Anyway, but this company in particular garnered a lot of investments in Utah, and he did become a multimillionaire from it. And so there was income coming into the community, into a community that is really cheap to live in. So yeah, that's kind of step one. But it's compounded by the fact of that they live the Mormon doctrine, or they attempt to live the Mormon doctrine of united order. Now, LDS Mormons promise to live consecration by giving their time and 10% of your income, but 10% of your income is very different than 100% of your income.
They never jump to 100.
No, right. That's it. So, even if in 1933, Heber J. Grant called the polygamous Mormons in Short Creek, he called them United Order enthusiasts because they went so hard with this idea. And the idea was really...
Yeah, Nicole, are you familiar with that? Christina, explain kind of what the United Order is.
So the United Order was it was a 19th century ideal of living communitarianism, of living with all things in common. And the idea given through Revelation was that if you do this, there shall be no poor among you. And so it was rooted in this kind of really beautiful vision of those who are faithful will always be taken care of. They will not be in poverty. We'll all contribute our wealth to be able to support each other. And so the ideal was really beautiful. And this really spoke to polygamous Mormons in the 1930s because they had really big families and the Depression hit and they couldn't rely on the government programs because they were felons. And they definitely couldn't rely on the church welfare program because they had all been excommunicated. And so the plot to live United Order becomes a really kind of obvious step. This was all solidified under John Y. Barlow, who started the United Effort Plan, the UEP, which owned all the property in the community. It owned everything in the community. And so people in the FLDS had businesses, but every single thing went to the one man. The other thing is that has been reported under Warren is there were cases of welfare fraud. And the reason for that is Warren did encourage this to happen because without a legal marriage certificate, these are all single moms. Mm-hmm. Every single one of Warren's wives, except for one, is a single mom in the eye of the state.
Wow. So you're saying they took advantage of that and that's one of the ways they generated income?
Yes. And I mean, I do want to note that many of these women were kind of coerced into, like, this was largely Warren's plotting.
Yes.
So I don't want to kind of, all these women were victims.
Yeah.
These men are bad, but like these men aren't dumb.
Well, that's
like, this is like, out of all of the way, because I'm thinking the same thing of money. I'm like, okay, well, there's financial manipulation obviously happening. Like, I mean, if it happens with people outside of religion and relationships, like this is just on steroids. But I'm like, that's genius.
Well, and I would also say that one of the things that, especially when like decriminalization and legalization comes up, that is, important to note is that if you send all of your children, if you send all of your families away, if you send the wives away, if you send the children away, you kick them all out, whatever, these aren't legal marriages. You do not owe child support. You do not owe alimony. You owe nothing. Because these are not legal marriages. These are just spiritual sealings. You don't have any financial stake in these people.
Okay, when is the documentary going to happen that follows all the people who were sent away? Like, those are the people that I mean, what becomes of them? Like, they're sent away where? We just don't know. We lose track of them. Are they able to, like, band together in any way and help each other? I can't even imagine that.
I mean, there was a documentary called Lost Boys. I mean, in general, there's controversy with documentaries about these communities. A lot of people who are victims or are survivors of these communities have a lot of difficulty with the whole documentary industry. But
for good reason?
Yes, for good reason, of course. But it is absolutely a real thing that both the FLDS and the Kingston community are known for sending boys away. And you have there is no financial repercussion for the men of this community, that you can have 78 wives and you can have innumerable children and you have no financial legal tie to them because they're not real marriages in the eyes of the state.
That is wild. Yeah, I amend my statement. I don't want the documentary. I just want like GoFundMes for all of them and like paid for therapy and housing. I just, Do these women, and I know it's probably different everywhere. I guess I'm more so talking about the crick. Do they handle their own money in any way? Like, are they like going back to like the education part of it? Like what? That's the part where it gets confusing for me.
No, and that's where one of the kind of, just to do a shout out for anyone who's interested in kind of organizations that are very reputable that do help. In Short Creek Cherish Families is run by a woman named Shirley Draper. She's actually in the documentary. She was raised in the community. She's no longer in the community, obviously. And she runs Cherished Families. And one of the things that has been really important for people, I know one woman in particular who really changed her life, is that they do financial literacy courses, and they teach people how to balance a checkbook, how to open a bank account, how to survive with a credit card, a debit card, paying things off, etc. Because that is something that people absolutely do have to learn. I mean, we take for granted certain things. You didn't have to learn what, you did, but you learned it over time growing.
Yeah. It was part of the natural course of your education and upbringing.
Yes.
Can we talk about the music video for the Queen, just for some needed levity?
We could talk about that. We could talk about the parkour.
The hiking parkour.
Listen, if you don't laugh, you'll cry. And I have to admit that I have looked up edits to him parkouring, because I'm like, in what world are you so proud to do this in front of a camera?
Oh, I loved when Tolgo's like, I just have to follow him around on his motorcycle. He's so bad. Like, he can't even jump the motorcycle. Oh my gosh. It's like the smallest bit of righteous pleasure in him just making an absolute fool of himself. Did he also, did he ever start construction on the palace? We hope not. We don't know.
I think that was because I don't mind, this is a bad man, but there is a level of deluded to think the Queen would know who you are.
And okay, that was one question. And this is something where I'm like, okay, it's like someone thinking that swig is part of Mormon doctrine, maybe. But I'm like, is that whole thing where when they're sharing their goals and he says, my goal is to rule the world and have the Queen, is there any doctrinal backing that he's making for this connection to the Queen of England, or is that just total deluded ego?
I think it's ego, but you know what I will say, which is kind of the gross irony, is that because of the documentary, the Queen consort might actually know who he is. Right? The King of England might actually know the name Sam Bateman now because of Netflix.
Oh, see,
does Sam Bateman, how in this docuseries they showed some of those videos of Warren Jeffs speaking from prison? Mm-hmm. Has Sam tried to do that at all?
I actually don't know. I don't know that. I know with Warren, people came in and acted as secretaries and would take down revelations. His son Helaman really kind of did that for a long time, and his revelations circulate pretty widely. I know a few years ago they were showing up at schools, even in Utah, boxes of them. And there's a bookstore that a good friend of mine, Brian, works at in Salt Lake City, and people deliver boxes of them to just see if he'll sell them. Which is something.
Does Warren know about Sam? Did Warren ever address Sam?
I don't know. I don't read Warren's revelations, thank God.
That is probably a good call. Okay, well, I feel like we should, I guess kind of wrapping up, even though we could talk about this forever.
Yeah, I feel like I got more questions now. I you can't see this, but I feel like I'm in school. I'm taking notes. I
want to know if you think that, on balance, Netflix making a documentary like this helps or hurts a community like this and other vulnerable communities like it. I don't know if you have an answer to that, but I'm just having the question now, and I'm curious if you have thoughts.
Oh boy. Well, I will say, I think there's something to be said about awareness, that there are a lot of people who don't realize that this kind of rampant abuse is happening. It seems like something of, it's so extreme that we just cannot imagine. And so the extent to which it sheds light on a very real dark part of humanity, I think that is important. At the same time, a survivors, a lot of people who've escaped the FLDS, and a few people who are even in the documentary do have concerns. And I think that needs to be really kind of wrestled with, that people from this community are bothered by that. Short Creek in general has undergone drastic changes in the last, just 10 years to really attempt at solving this problem, an attempt at, revitalizing their community. And one of the real hurdles is it possible to revitalize a community if it's constantly a Netflix true crime series? Can you make Short Creek better if it's always just going to be that polygamous, dangerous town? And so that is a big hurdle that people who are doing very real, important work in the community do struggle with, of can they fix their town? And so I think that needs to be held in tension, that it does raise awareness, but survivors have come forward and been bothered by it. The AI thing is very weird. A lot of those women were not altered enough. They should have blurred their faces. One woman in particular has come forward and said that, her face was not changed. And she was a minor. That's a problem. And also, how do you move forward? And is Netflix impeding the ability to do that?
Yeah, it's like, what is Netflix's intention? Their intention is to get views. It's like, where's the line between awareness and what's the word I'm looking for? Like voyeurism and entertainment, right? And that's always my thing with true crime. I'm like, who is this helping? Who is this for? Or is the average person watching this? Yeah. Is the average person watching this like, oh, I now have so much compassion and care for these people? Or are they texting their friends? Did you see this insane thing? It's so gross, right? Like,
I think it's that.
Like, I just feel like, okay, and that just, I guess, speaks to the darkest timeline we're on, where we're like, oh, it's so educational to watch this Netflix docuseries. Like, read the news. I don't know.
Right.
Oh.
Right.
I have, well, hang on. I thought I had two things. I might only have one. But, yes, two things. One, just a comment, going back to that AI. Rebbie and I were kind of talking about this off recording, but this is the second Netflix documentary that I've watched that they do that AI face thing. And it is, I would have to agree with you. It's bad. I think that there is more harm in that than just blurring the faces, because in the other documentary that I saw, I think she just wanted to be anonymous, so instead of blurring or changing, and they did the AI, and I mean it was so it took my attention off of everything else, and I only focused on that. I'm like,
creatively, it's not a good fix. It's distracting. Also, I feel like the times where they did have faces blurred out, that actually made it more palpable to me. This is the percentage of women who were underage. Like, it's more helpful, creatively or message wise to blur. Yeah. I'm like, we do not have, that was a weird choice.
That's weird. And then the second thing I was going to say is, like, that's crazy when you put it in a perspective of, like, here is this community that is just true crime documentary after true crime documentary. But, like, I know for me, the biggest takeaway was, wow, like, this happened, I mean, just a short time ago. Like, this is happening in the modern world. Like, a lot of the documentaries that are, about communities like this, like, the footage makes it look so old, and you're, you can say, oh, this was 20 plus years ago, or, oh, look at this from 50 plus years ago. But, like, people like Sam Bateman exist everywhere. And obviously, like, I think that this community was more vulnerable than most to succumb to something like Sam Bateman. But in your experience, Cristina, like, what would you say are, like, I don't know, maybe like warning flags of, like, I mean, for anybody, because men in power are scary, like, or anybody who has a mission or a goal or whatever they want to achieve. Like, if they're bad enough, they're going to do whatever they can to achieve their goal. So, like, I don't know, like, is there something that everyday people can look out for, or, like,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard because with people like Warren Jeffs and Sam Bateman and some other notable examples, I mean, it's such an insular community that you're born into that it's very, it would be easy for me to say, there was a red flag there, but would I have seen that had I been born into it? And I can't actually think of very many comparable situations that, I mean, I think the closest is like NXIVM. Like, we all watched those documentaries of very kind of people not born in those communities experienced joining one. But I think in general, it's always worth being weary of totalizing communities or people that enact totalizing behaviors of every part of your life is revolved around this very one thing. And that one thing is me.
Yeah.
Like in general, very solid advice. Everything revolves around one thing, and that thing is me. That's probably not the community for you.
Cristina, is there a piece of media that you would like to see about an FLDS community? I mean, and it could be like a book or a podcast or like anything. Like, is there any way that you feel like media could be used to benefit this community?
Yeah, I mean, I think so Shirley Draper was in the documentary, and Cherished Families has done a lot of good work. I mean, I think it would be great to see what is Short Creek actually like now? Most people probably would be shocked and awed that there's a brewery in the town, and there's a winery is in the town, and they make pretty good wine. It's tannin free or something. I don't know. It's like sulfate free. I don't know. Sulfate free. And then they have jalapeno popper pizza. That's like really good. And so I think, I don't know, something that could demonstrate the attempt of people who are born in the community, from the community, being able to tell the story of actually what life is like after. I think that could be beneficial. But I also don't think, that's not a story that Netflix is going to purchase the rights to, unfortunately.
Yeah. Ugh.
It sounds like we need the documentary that Christine set out to do before stumbling upon all of this.
Yes.
That kind of seems like what
actually like. Yeah. That she was like, I want to show like the reality. And then it was like, okay, the reality is so bleak. Yeah. Okay. Well, this has been so fascinating, and it's all really heavy and complicated, but thank you so much for sharing your knowledge on this. Like, it feels, I just did not even want to attempt to comment on this without you because I'm like, there's just so much more that's going on that Netflix isn't going to touch. So thank you so much. Going
back to the media, Cristina, is there a podcast, a book, a documentary? Like, is there one that's already out that you think like has good history, or that has good, like, for people who are maybe wanting to dive in a little deeper and learn more about communities they don't know about?
There was a podcast series on Short Creek. I forgot the title of it. I think it's called like Short Creek something.
Unfinished?
Yes. That one included a lot of people from the community. For people who are interested in kind of the lead up to how this community came to be, Martha Bradley's Kidnapped from That Land is a really great account of the 1953 raid, of the raids before that, and of just the experience of how this community came to be. So probably that. That's
great. I also know that Eli, Trib columnist and one of our friends of the podcast, did a while back on his Strangerville podcast. I'm remembering that he interviewed someone who had been kicked out of, a young man who'd been kicked out of the community, and it is like gut wrenching, but like very enlightening.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I hope that next time we're talking about something else.
Yeah. Maybe there's more laughs involved.
Yeah. I was going to say, Nicole, would you rather, like, which was more pleasant, talking about this or talking about, if we had been talking about Taylor, Frankie Paul and The Bachelorette? I don't know. I don't know. Like, very different versions of unpleasant.
That's true. Yeah, it's all unpleasant, but it's like, pick your poison.
Yeah, can't compare them. Okay, well, thank you so much, Cristina. We cannot wait for people to hear this, and yeah, you are the best. Thanks so much.
Thank you.